The morning looked ordinary until it wasn't. A cry too small for the human ear rippled through the noise of engines and footsteps, catching the attention of a man who thought he'd already lost everything. What he found on that conveyor belt didn't just defy logic, it resurrected purpose.
It's okay.
Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment about where you're watching from. What happens next will make you question what truly
What did she put in there?
breathes. The morning rush at Atlanta International Airport was as ordinary as any day could be. Family saying goodbyes, businessmen glued to phones, engines humming beyond the windows. Yet amid that daily noise, retired veteran Samuel Hart, a tall black man with gray-streaked hair and calm, weary eyes, sensed something that others missed. He had learned to read silence in places where life and death shared the same breath. Wearing his old military jacket and holding a worn cane, he waited at the baggage carousel near Terminal 3. The world moved fast around him, but his attention was fixed on a single detail: a black suitcase sliding across the belt, trembling ever so slightly, as if it were breathing. At first he thought it was just vibration, maybe another case bumping it from behind. But then it shuddered, paused, and moved again with rhythm. That wasn't random. It was instinct. It was alive. Samuel's heart tightened. The way it trembled reminded him of a heartbeat pressed against rubble back when he pulled wounded soldiers out from collapsed bunkers overseas. He took one step closer. Behind him, the chatter continued. Boarding calls, rolling wheels, laughter, but to him everything had gone silent. His instincts whispered warnings that his mind tried to deny. He watched the bag circle once more, every revolution making his stomach sink deeper. Then came the bark. A sharp, piercing bark from the K-9 unit patrolling the area. The German Shepherd lunged toward the same suitcase, its body, rigid teeth bared. Rex Heel, the handler, shouted, but the dog wouldn't back off. Travelers gasped, phones came up to record. The handler grabbed the leash, confusion flashing across his face as Rex barked again, low and urgent, his eyes locked on the black suitcase. Possible explosive, someone yelled. Instantly, red alarms flooded the hall, and the robotic voice of the airport system called for evacuation. Fear spread faster than reason. Parents clutched children, people dropped luggage, and Samuel found himself alone in the chaos, standing closer than anyone else dared. As passengers poured toward the exits, he didn't move. His instincts told him something different, something familiar. The handler radioed for the bomb squad, his voice tense. "We've got a live object in an untagged suitcase, possible chemical residue area locked down." But Samuel's gaze didn't waver. He stepped closer, ignoring the warning shouts. Then, in the thick air between alarms, he heard a faint whimper. It was not mechanical. It was not wind. It was something fragile trying to exist. His breath hitched as his chest filled with a surge of painful recognition. That sound. He'd heard it before, under smoke and dust, when he'd pressed a trembling hand against a fallen friend's chest and begged him to hold on. Samuel whispered, "That's not danger. That's a cry for help." But no one heard him over the chaos. The bomb team arrived in armor, barking orders. They extended a robotic arm toward the suitcase, the claw hovering above it, like a vulture over prey. Rex barked again, snarling and pulling so hard that his handler nearly lost grip. "What's wrong with him?" the captain demanded. "He's not reacting to explosives. He's reacting to something alive," the handler replied, shaken. The robotic arm gripped the case handle, but before it could lift, the suitcase moved on its own. A small thump echoed, not from impact, but from inside. "Stop!" Samuel shouted, his voice cutting through the panic. Everyone froze. The soldier in him had spoken before he'd even thought. "You open that like it's a bomb, you'll kill what's in there." The captain turned sharply. "Sir, you're out of line. Get behind the barrier." Samuel raised his hand slowly, palm open. "Just listen." For a moment, even the alarms seemed to fade, and in that heavy silence, they heard it again, the weak scratching of something trapped, something breathing shallow and uneven. "Jesus!" one technician muttered. "It's alive." The crowd behind the security line gasped in disbelief. Samuel took a step forward, eyes locked on the suitcase. "You see, I told you." But the captain wasn't convinced. "It could be an animal used to smuggle biomaterial," she said, voice tight. "We don't take risks, and I don't leave the living to die," Samuel replied quietly. She hesitated. The K9 handler crouched beside Rex, who had stopped barking and was now whining softly, pressing his snout towards the case. The display on the scanner flickered organic matter, small, irregular heartbeat detected. "It's warm," the technician confirmed. "Not explosive." "Organic signature confirmed." The captain's eyes darted between the scanner and Samuel. "Fine," she said. "We'll open it manually. Stay back." Samuel didn't move far. The robot's claw unzipped the case with agonizing slowness. The sound of metal teeth sliding apart echoed like a drumbeat. The suitcase trembled. Steam rose from its edges thick with chemical odor. The zipper reached halfway, and then stopped. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then came the sound again, a faint, trembling cry. Not loud enough to startle, but soft enough to break every wall around the human heart. The technician's hands shook as he reached down, pulling the zipper the rest of the way. Inside lay nothing anyone expected. A small bundle wrapped in a torn blanket. It moved slightly. Then the blanket slipped, revealing matted fur, thin ribs, and a muzzle too small to belong to any adult animal. The puppy inside coughed once, a weak, broken sound, then whimpered again before falling still. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "It's a dog." But to Samuel, it wasn't just a dog. It was a soldier that never chose its war. He dropped his cane and knelt beside the case. "He's still breathing," he said, voice cracking. "Don't touch him," the captain barked. "He could be contaminated." Samuel ignored her, lifting the fragile creature into his arms. The warmth under his palms was fading, fast heartbeat, slowing like a fading signal in a storm. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Stay with me, little one." The flashing red lights still burned through the glass panels of Terminal 3 as the sound of alarms echoed off the steel beams overhead. Passengers had been herded behind a security line, trembling and murmuring, while the bomb technicians worked to clear the area. Samuel Hart sat on the cold floor, the fragile puppy still pressed against his chest beneath his jacket. It breathed weakly like a flickering candle. The warmth of the tiny body trembled against his ribs. He could feel its heartbeat, uneven, fragile but alive. "You're gonna be okay," he whispered, his voice gravelly from the years of smoke and shouting commands over battlefields. The scent of burnt fabric and antiseptic filled the air. Captain Torres approached her tone, clipped and defensive. "Sir, you need to step away from the animal. We need to test it for toxins and biological hazards." Samuel looked up at her with the calm that came from surviving worse things than orders. "You can test later. Right now it needs warmth, not wires." She hesitated, uncertain whether to argue. Behind them, Rex, the German shepherd who had first found the suitcase, began to whimper and stumble. His handler knelt beside him instantly. "Rex, easy boy, what's wrong?" The dog's breaths grew ragged. Foam flecked his mouth. "He's reacting to something," the handler said, panicked. "Chemical exposure," shouted one of the bomb techs. The scent of ammonia and bleach filled the air. The robot's sensors started blinking, yellow chemical trace detected. The crowd gasped as Rex collapsed completely, legs twitching as his chest heaved for air. The handler screamed for a medic, but Samuel was already moving, one hand supporting the puppy, the other reaching for the dying K9. "Get him away from the case." Torres ordered, her voice rising. "It's toxic." Samuel ignored her. He crouched beside the animal and placed a trembling hand on its side. He could feel the shallow thumps of the dog's heart. Rex's eyes, once alert and proud, rolled halfway shut, still searching for something unseen. Samuel whispered hoarsely, "You did your job, soldier. You warned us." The young handler's voice cracked. "He saved us, sir. He saved us all." Samuel looked up at the boy's face and saw in it the reflection of himself. Decades ago, young, scared, and still believing heroes lived forever. "Hold his head," Samuel said gently. The boy obeyed. The veteran took the K9's paw and felt the tremors fade until only stillness remained. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the alarms seemed quieter. Then Samuel said softly, "He was trying to warn us." The handler's lips quivered. Warn us of what? Samuel looked toward the half-unzipped suitcase and the chemical residue staining the floor. That this wasn't just cruelty, he said. This was deliberate. The technician's monitor beeped again. Low radiation levels, chemical residue traces of synthetic DNA markers. Torres' expression hardened. "We're dealing with biosmuggling," she muttered. "Probably experimental narcotics or tissue samples." But Samuel's attention was still on the two creatures before him, one lifeless one barely clinging to life. His hand brushed the puppy's head. "You knew what was inside, didn't you, boy?" he murmured toward the dead K9. "You tried to protect it." The handler wiped his eyes. Rex always barked at explosives or corpses, never at animals. Samuel's eyes darkened, because he didn't smell death. He smelled suffering. The puppy whimpered again, and Samuel turned back quickly. The little creature's ribs rose weakly. A medic approached with gloves and a mask kneeling beside him. "We'll take it to quarantine, sir." Samuel's hand tightened protectively around the bundle. "No, it's staying with me until it's stable." Torres crossed her arms. "You're not in charge here, Mr. Hart." Samuel met her eyes, and the quiet authority in his voice silenced everyone around them. "Ma'am, I've buried too many soldiers who didn't make it because somebody waited on a protocol instead of acting. This one's still fighting. You can test your theories later." The silence stretched. Then, reluctantly, Torres nodded once. "Fine. Keep it close, but stay where we can monitor you." Samuel gave a curt nod and wrapped the small body tighter in his jacket. He could feel its faint tremor against his heart, and he whispered, "You and me, little one. We've both seen too much fire." The medic placed an oxygen canister nearby. The air reeked of disinfectant and jet fuel, but the puppy stirred faintly at the warmth of his voice. "That's it," Samuel murmured. "You breathe for both of us." The handler knelt beside him, still clutching Rex's tag. "Sir, I'll file his report. He'll get a medal." Samuel stared at the fallen K9 and shook his head. "He doesn't need medals. He already did what heroes do," warned the living before dying. The handler lowered his gaze, tears slipping down his cheeks. The airport lights dimmed briefly as the technicians worked to ventilate the air. A low hum vibrated through the floor, and a drone camera floated overhead, broadcasting the scene for the investigators watching from the control room. They zoomed in on the suitcase still half open, its chemical stains glowing faintly under UV light. "Ma'am," the technician called out, "the compounds are experimental bio-encoded structures. This isn't drugs." "Then what is it?" Torres demanded. "We don't know yet," he replied, "but it's active." Samuel overheard his fingers still stroking the puppy's weak fur. He muttered, "Active means someone's still controlling it." Torres turned sharply toward him. "You think someone's watching us?" Samuel's eyes drifted upward toward the observation windows above the terminal. They don't smuggle something this complex without wanting to see if it survives. For a brief moment he could have sworn he saw a figure silhouetted behind the glass. On the mezzanine, a person standing still watching. When he blinked, the figure was gone. "Lock down the exits," Torres ordered. "If someone planted this, they're still here." The handler looked shaken. "You think the target was the dog?" "No." Samuel said quietly, staring down at the small puppy breathing against his chest. "The target was the experiment?" He ran a finger gently along its neck and found a faint circular scar beneath the fur. It wasn't natural. Something had been implanted there. The medic leaned closer, shining a flashlight. "It's surgical, and recent," Samuel added. He looked up. "Whoever did this didn't want it found, they wanted it transported." Torres's radio crackled. "Command to Captain Surveillance picking up an unregistered badge user near the east exit." Her face went pale. "They're trying to leave." Samuel looked toward the direction of the report. The little creature's breaths came in weak flutters, its ribs fragile as bird bones. The medics had brought in portable scanners, and the bomb squad still lingered unsure whether to declare the threat neutralized. Captain Torres stood nearby, her radio crackling every few seconds with updates from the field team searching for the suspect. Samuel watched the lifeless K9 being carried away under a black tarp, and felt a sting in his chest that had nothing to do with age or the damp air. "You did your job, soldier," he whispered softly, as if the fallen dog could still hear him. The medic knelt beside him, eyes cautious. "Sir, I need to scan that animal again. The chemicals found on its fur suggest cross-contamination from the case." Samuel nodded reluctantly, letting the medic wave the small scanner over the puppy. The screen flickered, reading inconsistent data. "Still abnormal," the medic murmured. "There's something pulsing near the thoracic area." Captain Torres leaned closer. "Define pulsing. Not mechanical," the medic said. "Organic. A heartbeat, but it's faint and irregular. Could be a second source of rhythm, like interference." Samuel frowned. "What do you mean, second?" The medic hesitated. "It's syncing with something external." "Wait, hold still." He turned the scanner toward Samuel. The heartbeat signal spiked, flashing red. "It's matching his pulse," the medic whispered. A hush fell over the group. The scanner beeped in perfect time with Samuel's chest. The technician looked puzzled. How's that even possible? Samuel's jaw tightened as he looked down at the small creature barely clinging to life. Because sometimes the broken recognize their own. He felt the puppy's faint heartbeat through his jacket, a fragile rhythm aligning with his slow, uncertain but defiant. "We need to contain both," Torres said sharply. "That animal could be carrying a transmitter." But Samuel stood before she could finish. "You'll have to go through me." The authority in his voice froze her. She studied his face, dark, weathered, and resolute, the kind of calm that came only from surviving hell. For a moment, her expression softened. "You don't understand what you're risking, Mr. Hart." "Ma'am, I've already risked my life for strangers in countries I can't pronounce," he said. "This one's not going to die because we're afraid of paperwork." The medic whispered something about protocol, but Torres lifted a hand to silence him. "Fine. Do your scan again, but keep it steady." The technician obeyed, turning the scanner back to the suitcase that still sat near the conveyor belt. The robotic arm extended a probe, its lens glowing blue. The monitor displayed a thermal image. Faint red swirls, slow and organic, moving like a heartbeat echoing through metal. "There," the technician murmured. "That's no bomb. That's tissue." Another image appeared, nerve-like strands embedded inside the suitcase lining. "It's not just a living thing," he said. "It's connected to something mechanical." Samuel's stomach clenched. Connected how almost like it was fused, like someone used this case as an incubator. The word hung in the air, thick and heavy. The crowd of officers exchanged uneasy glances. "What kind of incubator are we talking about?" Torres asked. "Biological," the technician replied, "but crude improvised. It's leaking toxins from failed containment." The medic cursed under his breath. "That's what killed the dog." Samuel's hand instinctively shielded the puppy under his jacket. "And that's what's killing this one." He could feel the small creature's ribs moving too fast, its breathing shallow. "We need oxygen," he said urgently. "And water now." The medic handed over a portable tank. Samuel guided the small oxygen mask near the puppy's snout, holding it steady. The creature twitched, then let out a tiny whimper. The sound was weak, but alive. "Good girl," he murmured, without realizing he'd said it. The puppy's heartbeat faltered, then steadied against his palm. The rhythm matched his again, one breath to another, two broken souls clinging to each other for balance. Torres crouched beside him, her voice lower now. "You've seen a lot of dying, haven't you?" Samuel didn't look up. Too much. Enough to know when something wants to live. "You think this is—" that she asked quietly. "I think it's fighting harder than most people I've known." His voice cracked slightly. "And I won't let it lose." The scanner beeped again, showing faint improvements in temperature and heart rate. "She's stabilizing," the medic whispered. "For now." Samuel stroked the pup's fur. Beneath the grime, he could see patches of pale skin scars, needle marks, burns. "What did they do to you?" he muttered. "What kind of person hurts something like you?" The medic exchanged a grim look with Torres. "Someone testing endurance," he said. "Someone who needed to see how much life could survive transport." "You're saying she's not just cargo?" Samuel asked. "No, sir. She's the experiment." The room seemed to shrink around those words. The officers shifted uneasily, and Torres turned to her radio. "Command, I want full lockdown. We have a confirmed biohazard specimen and potential live host involvement." Static crackled. A voice replied, "Copy that. Maintain containment. Reinforcements ETA 10 minutes. Samuel's pulse pounded in his ears. He looked toward the upper observation windows, half expecting to see that shadow again, the one watching earlier. And there it was. A faint silhouette, unmoving head tilted slightly. Whoever it was, they hadn't left. "They're still here," Samuel said. Torres followed his gaze but saw nothing. "Who?" "The one who did this," he replied. "You think someone just left that bag by accident?" "We have cameras," Torres said. "We'll find them." Samuel shook his head. "Cameras can't see everything." He turned back to the puppy whose small body pressed closer to his chest, its breathing shallow but steady. But instinct can. The veteran rose slowly, adjusting his jacket to shield her. If they're watching, they already know she's alive. That means they'll try to finish what they started. Torres frowned. "You're suggesting they'll come back for the animal?" The scanners kept beeping in uneven rhythm, mirroring the faint heartbeat of the puppy still cradled in Samuel's arms. The small creature had stopped whimpering and now lay still, wrapped tightly in his jacket, trusting a man whose hands had done too much harm in younger days, but now existed only to protect. The technician adjusted the robotic claw hovering over the suitcase. "Proceeding with secondary containment scan," he announced. The robot's lens whirred, focusing. The thermal image on the monitor flickered, showing not one but two heat sources inside the bag. "Second compartment detected," the tech said, his voice tightening. "Reading temperature irregularity. Possible active device." Torres exhaled sharply. So it wasn't just the animal. "No, ma'am," the tech replied. "There's something else in there." Samuel took one step forward, ignoring the warning line on the floor. "You sure you want to open that?" Torres glanced at him, her tone clipped. "We don't have a choice. If it's live, we contain it. If it's evidence, we preserve it. Either way, we find out what's killing everything that touches it." The robot's claw grasped the metal latch, twisting it slowly. A deep metallic click echoed through the terminal. The case shuddered, steam rising from within as the temperature gauge spiked. "Thermal spike detected." The technician shouted. "Shut it down!" No, Torres barked. "Open it now before it destabilizes." The lid creaked open another inch. A hiss escaped like breath from something buried too long. Samuel's chest tightened. The sound was wrong. It wasn't mechanical. It was organic, like exhalation. The lid fell back, exposing a sealed compartment lined with reflective foil and damp fibers. Inside lay rows of glass capsules filled with amber fluid, faintly glowing wires, snaking between them like veins. "Jesus," whispered one officer. "What the hell is that?" The technician leaned closer, scanning. "Bioreactive compounds, high protein density, integrated nanostructures. It's growing." Torres frowned. "Growing, it's alive," the tech said. Or was. Maybe both. Samuel stepped closer, the light from the capsules reflecting in his dark eyes. "They used her," he murmured, nodding to the puppy. "Used her to test how long life could survive inside that poison." Torres shook her head, muttering, "This is beyond smuggling. This is military-level research." "Or worse," Samuel said softly. "Private. Hidden. Like the things we buried overseas." His voice drifted low, filled with memories of secret projects whispered about during missions that never made it into history books. The technician carefully removed one capsule, with tongs placing it on a metal tray. The fluid inside pulsed faintly. "Temperature's stable, but reactive," he said. "There's movement microscopic filaments responding to air exposure." Torres turned to Samuel. "You've seen this kind of work before, haven't you?" His silence was answer enough. He looked down at the small life in his arms and saw her tiny chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. The puppy's head tilted slightly, as if sensing the change in air, a faint sound escaping her throat that made everyone pause, a low, fragile whine that didn't sound like pain but recognition. The medic froze. "Captain, the animal's responding to the open case. Heart rate's rising. Samuel frowned. You feel that? He pressed his hand against his chest. The pulse from the tiny body under his jacket matched his own again. The technician shouted, "We're picking up a signal." There's a faint digital transmission coming from inside the case. The monitor displayed a pattern, a repeating binary code cycling every 3 seconds. It's broadcasting, the tech said, to where Torres demanded. Unknown? It's encrypted. Samuel's mind raced. He looked down at this puppy again, at the faint surgical scar along her neck. She's the receiver, he said, or maybe the carrier. Explain, Torres ordered. That signal's not coming from the suitcase, it's coming through her. They linked her heartbeat to whatever's in those capsules. The medic swore softly, stepping back. The puppy stirred again, eyes fluttering open for the first time. They were pale gray, almost translucent, and in their reflection Samuel saw his own face, weary, broken, still clinging to something called faith. Easy now, he whispered. You're safe. But even as he said it, the scanner beeped again, faster this time. The fluid in one capsule vibrated violently, small bubbles rising to the surface. The technician tried to shut down the containment field, but static filled the monitors. We're losing control, Torres shouted. The capsule cracked slightly, a thin wisp of steam escaping. The medic lunged forward, sealing it inside an isolation pod. Got it, he panted. Samuel stood motionless, clutching the puppy tighter as she whimpered softly. It's reacting to her, he said. Whatever this is, it knows she's alive. That's impossible, Torres snapped. It's chemical. No, Samuel said. It's memory. His words confused them, but he meant it. He could feel it, a link between the tiny heart beating against his chest and the pulsing light within the glass. They were connected, bound by whatever horror someone had engineered. Then he noticed something tucked beneath the puppy's blanket, a small, crumpled photograph smeared with oil and tears. He pulled it out carefully. The image showed a child no older than 10, with big gray eyes and a faint scar at the base of the neck, the same as the puppy. His blood ran cold. What's that? Torres asked. Proof, Samuel whispered. Whoever did this wasn't testing animals. They were testing transformation. The words felt heavy, even leaving his mouth. He looked at the puppy again, whose breathing had calmed, as if hearing him. His fingers trembled around the photograph. The boy in the picture looked eerily familiar, not by face, but by spirit. The same expression Samuel had seen once before, in a picture folded deep in his wallet. His own son gone years ago, killed in an accident he'd never forgiven himself for. The same quiet courage in the eyes, the same vulnerability that could undo any soldier. For the first time in decades, Samuel felt tears sting his eyes. You're not supposed to be here, he whispered to the tiny creature, his voice cracking. Captain Torres paced along the terminal's edge, her boots echoing on the tile while she barked orders into her radio. Samuel Hart sat near the containment perimeter, his jacket still wrapped around the puppy, now resting quietly in his lap. Her breathing was slow, steady, the faint pulse of her tiny heart pressing through the fabric like a secret rhythm keeping him alive. He stared at the photo again, the boy with gray eyes and the same scar on his neck, unable to shake the eerie connection. It reminded him too much of the son he'd buried decades ago, the same soft innocence staring back at him from behind glass, before the world took everything away. Torres broke the silence. We've got surveillance footage, she announced. The room turned toward her. A technician wheeled over a monitor and played back the video. The grainy image showed a woman in a beige coat, head-lowered face obscured by a surgical mask and sunglasses. She moved with eerie calm, setting the black suitcase on the conveyor belt before walking away without a backward glance. Timestamp, Torres asked. 30 minutes before we found it, the tech replied. She scanned in through gate 12, but she's not listed on any passenger manifest. Fake ID. Fake, everything the technician said. Badge number doesn't exist. And the access card she used was cloned from a maintenance worker who called in sick today. So she never boarded Torres Prest. No ma'am, the tech said. She vanished after leaving the bag. Cameras lost her near the upper mezzanine. Samuel frowned, glancing up toward the glass balcony above the terminal. The same place he thought he'd seen a figure earlier. You checked every exit all but one, Torres said. Service corridors are sealed, but there's one maintenance stairwell that feeds into the observation wing. Then that's where she is, Samuel said quietly. Torres shot him a look. You're not part of this operation, Mr. Hart. You wouldn't have a heartbeat left to monitor if I hadn't been. He replied, standing. The quiet defiance in his voice made her pause. She gave a small nod to two officers. Escort him and keep him behind me. Samuel adjusted his coat. The puppy cradled against his chest and followed them toward the staircase that wound upward behind the baggage scanners. The lights flickered as they climbed, the hum of machinery echoing through the walls. The smell of oil and metal filled the stairwell. Torres raised a hand for silence. Somewhere above, a faint creak of movement broke the stillness. She's here, Torres whispered. The team advanced cautiously. At the landing, they found a half-empty cup of coffee still warm on the ledge beside a discarded badge. Torres picked it up. She was watching us. The sound of footsteps echoed again, faint but unmistakable, moving towards the old observation deck. They followed. The air grew colder, the sound of rain against the glass faintly audible as they stepped into the abandoned lounge above the terminal. Rows of empty seats faced the tarmac below. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows, distorted by streaks of water. Spread out, Torres ordered. Samuel stayed near the back, holding the puppy closer as she stirred her small nose, twitching like she sensed something approaching. The veteran's instincts screamed the same. He felt eyes on him. The puppy whimpered softly, ears perking. Then came the reflection of faint outline in the glass ahead. A woman stood behind the far column watching them. There, an officer shouted. Torres raised her weapon. Freeze! The woman didn't run. She stepped slowly into view. Her beige coat was soaked from rain, her hair dark, face pale. But what struck Samuel wasn't her appearance, it was her calm. Her expression was heartbreakingly human. You shouldn't have opened it, she said quietly, her voice trembling between grief and fury. Torres barked, hands up. The woman obeyed, but didn't seem afraid. You don't understand, she said. It wasn't supposed to happen here. What wasn't supposed to happen, Torres demanded. The woman looked toward Samuel, eyes flickering to the small bundle in his arms. You found her, she whispered. Then you've doomed yourself. Samuel's grip tightened. You did this to her, he said, his voice low. You turned her into something unnatural. No, the woman said sharply. I saved her. She's the only one that survived. Her words struck the air like lightning. The officers froze. Explain, Torres said. You're working with the ones who made this. Working with them, the woman laughed bitterly. No, running from them. She took a slow step forward, her hands trembling. They're coming to retrieve what's theirs. And they don't leave witnesses. Samuel's jaw clenched. Who are they, Hirabio? She whispered. They're not just making things. They're replacing them. Torres motioned for the officers to move in, but the woman's eyes never left Samuel. You shouldn't have touched her, she said. You won't be able to let go now. Her words made his blood run cold. What's that supposed to mean? He demanded. The woman's expression softened just slightly, and for a brief second Samuel saw something hauntingly familiar, the way her eyes softened when she looked at him, the way her lower lip trembled. It was the same expression his wife Elaine used to have when she tried to hold her pain back before saying goodbye at the hospital all those years ago. The resemblance hit him like a bullet. It wasn't her, of course, but something in the woman's fragile composure cracked him open. The years of buried grief, the nights spent sitting alone in a house too quiet, came flooding back. The puppy stirred again, letting out a faint cry. The woman flinched as if hearing something only she could understand. She's responding to you, the woman whispered. That's not supposed to happen. Torres moved closer, gun steady. Enough, she said. Hands behind your back. But the woman didn't resist. She looked once more at Samuel, eyes full of guilt. If you care for her, leave before they seal this place. You have no idea what she carries. The next second shattered the quiet. A gunshot rang out from the stairwell below. One of the officers stumbled, clutching his shoulder. "We've got contact," someone yelled. The lights flickered, alarms blaring again. "Move," Torres shouted. The woman turned to run, but Samuel reached out, catching her wrist. "Who's coming?" he demanded. "Tell me what's inside her." The woman met his gaze with tears in her eyes. "Your second chance," she whispered. Before he could react, a flashbang detonated at the far end of the deck, throwing them all backward. When Samuel's vision cleared, the woman was gone. Captain Torres barked into her radio, "Sector B under attack, SEAL, all stairwells." Now, her voice cut through the static as Samuel Hart clutched the puppy tighter, his pulse racing like it had in the worst days of combat. The glass panels of the observation deck vibrated under the force of the explosions below. He could smell the acrid scent of gunpowder and the faint chemical tang that still lingered from the opened suitcase. The puppy whimpered in his arms, trembling violently, its eyes darting at the chaos around them. "It's okay, little one," he murmured, pressing it against his chest. "You're safe." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. Downstairs, through the open door to the stairwell, shadows moved, too many, too organized. Men dressed in high-visibility vests and cargo helmets advanced through the smoke automatic weapons, glinting under the emergency lights. "They're inside already," shouted one officer. Torres fired 2 rounds, taking cover behind a column. "Keep them contained," she yelled. "No one gets past that hallway." Samuel crouched behind an overturned chair, scanning the perimeter like it was second nature. It had been years since he'd held a rifle, but his instincts hadn't rusted. The air crackled with tension. Another explosion rattled the walls, and the fire suppression system kicked in, releasing a thin mist that coated everything in a cold sheen. Through the haze, he saw something flash, a small, blinking light attached to one of the intruder's belts. They weren't just shooting their way in. They were marking the location. "They're tracking the biosignal," Samuel realized aloud. Torres ducked beside him. "What?" "They're not after you," he said, pulling back his jacket just enough to show the small creature trembling underneath. "They're here for her." Torres's face paled. "Then we move now," she said. "Follow me." They sprinted through the corridor, gunfire echoing behind them. One of the glass panels shattered, sending shards cascading like rain. The puppy let out a frightened cry. Samuel covered its head instinctively, his body taking the brunt of the glass. The sharp sting across his shoulder barely registered. "You okay?" Torres shouted. "Keep moving." Samuel grunted. They burst through a service door leading to a maintenance stairwell that descended toward the cargo level. The emergency lights flickered red, illuminating the wet concrete steps. "Down there," Torres ordered. "We'll regroup at the security bay." They descended quickly, the sound of boots pounding above them growing louder. "How many?" Samuel asked between breaths. "Too many," she said grimly. "They knew our schedule. They knew the response time." "Someone tipped them off," he said. "That woman, she didn't bring them." Torres interrupted. "She warned us." They reached the lower landing just as another explosion thundered from above, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The puppy whimpered again, pressing closer to Samuel's heartbeat. The veteran's arms tightened protectively. His breath ragged. "Easy, little one," he whispered. "You've survived worse than this." The corridor below was long and narrow, lit only by the flickering emergency strobes. Rows of cargo containers lined both sides, and the air smelled of diesel and rust. Torres motioned for silence as she crouched near the wall. They could hear faint movement ahead, boots scraping against metal whispers, in a language Samuel recognized from years in foreign deserts. "Mercenaries," he muttered. Torres nodded grimly. "They're professionals." "And so am I," Samuel said quietly, reaching for a fallen officer's weapon. Torres didn't stop him this time. "You remember how to use that, I remember why," he replied. They moved in sync. Torres covering the front, Samuel protecting the rear, every step echoing with the tension of a hunt that had already begun. As they passed a stack of crates, Samuel froze. He heard it, a faint beeping sound, steady and rhythmic. "Tripwire," he hissed. Torres cursed softly. They rigged the corridor. No, Samuel said, realizing too late. They rigged the signal. The small transmitter from the suitcase, still active in containment above, was bouncing off their equipment, leading the attackers straight to them. "They're not following us," he said. "They're following her heartbeat." The words left his mouth, just as the puppy stirred again, whining softly, her tiny chest heaving under the fabric of his coat. The sound pierced him in a way he hadn't felt in years. He remembered the same trembling rhythm from another life, a night when he'd carried his son through the wreckage of a collapsed overpass after the accident, whispering the same words. "Hold on, buddy. You're gonna be okay." He hadn't been okay. He'd died before the paramedics arrived. His heartbeat fading in Samuel's arms, the same way this little creature's had flickered hours earlier. That memory flooded back now, raw and merciless. For a moment he wasn't in a corridor of flashing red lights. He was back in the rain, kneeling beside twisted steel, begging God for one more heartbeat. And now, somehow, he had it. A faint squeal of tires snapped him back to the present. The attackers had breached the far end. Torres fired, shouting for cover. "They've got gas," she yelled, as smoke grenades rolled across the floor, filling the air with choking fog. Samuel pressed the puppy beneath his jacket and dropped behind a crate, coughing as the acrid air burned his lungs. "We're surrounded," he said. Torres ducked beside him, her weapon reloading with a metallic click. "They're trying to flush us toward the maintenance gate," she said. "Once we hit the runway tunnels, we're out of sight." Samuel nodded. "Then we make them think we're running." He glanced at a control panel nearby, the kind used for redirecting conveyor belts. "You ever use one of those?" Torres frowned. "You planning something?" "Yeah," he said, yanking the main lever. The belts roared to life, sending containers crashing down the corridor, a thunderous wall of steel that caught several attackers off guard. Shouts erupted as they scrambled for cover. "Move," Torres yelled. They sprinted through the chaos, Samuel gripping the rifle with one hand and the puppy with the other. Bullets whined past his ears. He fired back once, instinct guiding him. One man dropped, another stumbled. The world narrowed to adrenaline and noise, the clatter of shell casings, the roar of machinery, the faint, desperate cry from the small life he carried. They burst through the maintenance door into the rain-soaked tarmac. The cold air hit them like a shock. Planes sat idle under floodlights, their shadows long and distorted across the slick concrete. Torres signaled to the control tower, "We need evac Sector C compromised." The radio hissed back, static, then silence. "Comms jammed," she muttered. "They've cut us off." Samuel turned toward the storm clouds rolling in their reflection, flickering across his dark eyes. "Then we hold." With what she asked. With whatever's left. A bullet ricocheted off a nearby support beam, grazing his sleeve. They moved like soldiers, precise and silent, their masks reflecting the airport's floodlights. Samuel checked the chamber of his rifle, the weight both foreign and familiar in his hands. He looked down at the trembling bundle in his coat, the puppy's small head peeking out, fur damp, and matted eyes wide with confusion. "You're okay, little one," he murmured, though his voice betrayed the tremor beneath. The creature's tiny heartbeat thrummed against his chest, like a second pulse keeping him tethered to reality. Thunder rolled above as Torres fired another burst towards the hangar doors. "They're flanking left," she yelled. "Keep low." Samuel nodded and pressed his back to the truck. He moved along the side, his boots slipping on wet concrete. A flash of movement caught his eye. One of the mercenaries crouched near a cargo crate, attaching something small and metallic to the ground. Samuel aimed and fired once. The man dropped instantly, the device rolling free, blinking red. His stomach turned. "Torres," he shouted. "Explosive?" The ground erupted before he could finish. The world shattered into white light and deafening sound. The shockwave threw him backward, slamming his body into the slick concrete. Pain shot through his ribs. His ears rang vision-fractured. For a moment he thought the sky itself had collapsed. Rain fell in sizzling sheets where the fuel line had ruptured, igniting patches of fire that danced across puddles like living serpents. Captain, he coughed, struggling to his feet. The air stank of burning fuel and blood. He blinked through the smoke and saw shapes moving through the chaos, men hauling metal crates toward a waiting van beyond the hangar gate. The containment capsule. "No," he rasped. "No, damn it." He staggered forward, but his knees buckled halfway. The puppy whimpered, pawing weakly at his jacket. I know," he whispered, clutching her close. "We're not done." His head spun, ears filled with the faint echo of boots receding into the storm. Torres was nowhere in sight. The sirens wailed across the runway, a chorus of chaos rising over the rain. Samuel forced himself up, every muscle screaming in protest. His old injuries, the ones that haunted him every winter, flared like fire beneath his skin. But he pushed forward, limping through the smoke, scanning the wreckage. The once orderly tarmac was a graveyard of overturned luggage carts and smoldering debris. Then he saw it, a hand reaching out from beneath a fallen crate. "Torres!" he shouted, rushing toward her. But when he pulled the metal aside, it wasn't her. It was one of the attackers, barely breathing. The man's mask had cracked, revealing pale skin, and a tattoo on his neck, a geometric sigil Samuel had seen before, engraved on the metal tag found in the suitcase. The mercenary coughed, blood spilling from his lips. "You don't know what she is," he rasped. "You can't stop it now." "Who?" Samuel demanded, gripping the man's collar. "The woman in the coat. The ones who sent you." The mercenary's eyes darted toward the small creature peeking from Samuel's jacket. "No," he whispered. "Her." His hand lifted weakly toward the puppy before falling limp, his breath fading with the next crack of thunder. Samuel's grip loosened, horror twisting in his gut. He looked down at the tiny being against him, her chest rising and falling beneath soaked fur. "What are you?" he murmured. Lightning struck somewhere close, and the airport lights flickered before dying completely, plunging everything into shadow. The sudden darkness swallowed sound, leaving only the hiss of rain and the faint hum coming from the small creature in his arms. It wasn't loud, more like the soft resonance of something alive, yet more than flesh. Then she stirred her nose, twitching toward the far end of the hangar. Samuel turned, following her gaze. In the distance, through sheets of rain, a faint shape crawled along the ground. Torres. He didn't think he ran. Each step splashed through puddles of oil and water, each breath a knife in his lungs. "Captain," he called, sliding to her side. Her uniform was soaked in blood from a gash across her abdomen. Her eyes fluttered open. "They took it," she rasped. "The capsule. She coughed, wincing. "It doesn't matter. They left something worse." Samuel tore open his sleeve, pressing it against her wound. "You're not dying here, not like this." "Samuel," she whispered, gripping his wrist weakly. "You need to leave. They'll come back." "I've been left behind once," he said firmly. "Never again." She tried to speak, but the words turned into a gasp as the puppy wriggled free of his coat. "Hey, no," he said, reaching out. The small creature stepped onto Torres's chest, her fur shimmering faintly in the dim light. Samuel froze. The glow grew stronger, soft, and golden beneath the storm-dark sky. The puppy leaned forward, pressing its tiny paw gently against the open wound. Torres groaned, her body tensing. Samuel's heart pounded as the light spread under her skin like veins of dawn chasing darkness. The bleeding slowed. The glow pulsed with the rhythm of two heartbeats, one human, one small and fragile, synchronized like before. What's happening?" Torres whispered. Samuel didn't answer. He couldn't. He could only watch as the creature's small body trembled, as if giving something away, a warmth, a strength, something unseen, yet real. When the glow faded, Torres exhaled shakily and touched her side. The bleeding had stopped. "She healed me," she murmured in disbelief. Samuel reached down gently, scooping the puppy back into his hands. Her breathing was labored weaker than before, the shimmer in her fur dimming. "She gave you part of herself," he said quietly. The captain looked at him, eyes wide. "That thing in the suitcase wasn't just science," she said. "It was soul transfer, organic energy. They weren't just making life. They were trying to make immortality." Samuel shook his head. And now they've got what they need to finish it. He looked down at the trembling creature, so small, so breakable, yet somehow more human than anything built in a lab. "You didn't ask to be born this way," he whispered, "but you saved her anyway." Thunder boomed overhead as the floodlights flickered back on, casting the scene in a harsh white light. The fire crews arrived, their shouts echoing in the distance. Torres pushed herself upright, wincing. "They'll be gone before backup reaches them," she said. "We need to move before they regroup." Samuel nodded, tucking the puppy back into his coat. The warmth had almost vanished now. "I know where they'll go," he said grimly. "If they took that capsule, they'll need a place to stabilize it. And I think I saw where your cameras couldn't." Torres frowned. Where he looked toward the far end of the runway, where the shadows swallowed the storm's light. The old hangar near the perimeter fence. The one that hasn't been used since the quarantine drills 5 years ago. That's where they'll finish what they started. Torres stared at him, then nodded slowly. The wind screamed across the empty runway as Samuel Hart and Captain Torres pushed through the storm toward the derelict quarantine hangar crouched at the far edge of the airfield. The building loomed like a dying beast, its rusted steel ribs jutting against the night sky, windows shattered and flickering with intermittent lightning. The rain soaked them through, but they kept moving, driven by something deeper than orders. Behind Samuel's jacket, the small creature pressed weakly against his chest, its breathing shallow, the warmth beneath its fur fading by the minute. "We're close," Torres said, clutching her side, her uniform still stained from the wound the puppy had healed. "That place hasn't been used since the biodrills," she added. "It's not on any active grid. They could hide anything inside." Samuel's voice was rough from smoke and exhaustion. "Then let's drag it into the light." He tightened his grip on the rifle, his knuckles pale beneath the rain. They reached the side entrance, its lock broken, the heavy door creaking open to reveal a cavern of darkness. The smell hit them first. Sterile chemicals mixed with decay and damp metal. Emergency generators hummed faintly in the distance. "They're still here," Torres whispered, "powers running." Samuel scanned the room through the beam of his flashlight. The interior stretched wide, filled with forgotten medical stations, cracked containment tanks, and walls marked by old quarantine warnings. A faint trail of footprints glistened on the wet concrete leading toward the back of the hangar. He gestured silently, and they followed it deeper into the shadows. Somewhere ahead, machinery whirred, steady and rhythmic. The sound made Samuel's stomach tighten. The light revealed a row of black crates stacked near an old decontamination chamber. Several of them had been pried open. Inside, glass cylinders glowed faintly, containing viscous fluid that shimmered with lifelike movement. Torres knelt beside one. "This is the same material from the suitcase," she said, her voice trembling. "But it's multiplying." The liquid inside rippled as if responding to their presence. "They're harvesting it," Samuel said grimly. "Whatever they couldn't control before they're trying again." "No," Torres said. "They're finishing it." The faint hum grew louder. They turned the corner and froze. In the center of the hangar stood the stolen containment capsule, now upright and pulsing with pale blue light. Cables snaked from it into portable generators, monitors blinking with rapid data streams. Around it stood the remaining mercenaries, their masks reflecting the glow like cowed mirrors. One of them turned his voice, amplified through a comm link. "You shouldn't have followed us, Captain." Torres aimed her weapon. "Step away from the capsule." The man tilted his head. "You don't understand what you're protecting. This is evolution." Samuel stepped forward, rain dripping from his jacket. "Evolution doesn't need a gun to survive." The mercenary chuckled. "No, but it needs guardians willing to make sacrifices." He pressed a switch on his wrist device, and the capsule hissed. The glass split open down the middle, releasing a plume of steam that crawled across the floor like breath from the grave. The air grew colder. Torres shouted. They retreated behind a crate as the steam cleared. Inside the capsule, something moved. At first it looked like an animal, small, trembling, but as it unfolded, it was wrong. Its limbs were too long, its eyes too hollow, its ribs visible through translucent skin. It made a soft sound that wasn't quite a growl, more like a moan. Samuel's breath caught. The thing resembled the puppy he carried, but distorted a mirror cracked beyond repair. "What in God's name?" Torres whispered. The lead mercenary approached it reverently. "Prototype 1, he said. "The first attempt. The one they said failed. It survived longer than expected, but without the stabilizing pulse, it decayed. Until now." Samuel's hands clenched around his weapon. "That thing's alive," he said. "Barely," the man replied. "We only need its neural imprint. Then the project completes." "Over my dead body," Samuel growled. "That can be arranged," the man said coldly. The firefight erupted before the sentence ended. Torres fired first her shot, catching one of the mercenaries square in the chest. The hangar exploded with muzzle flashes and ricochets. Samuel dove behind a crate, firing in controlled bursts. Bullets ripped through metal sparks, flying. The prototype shrieked, stumbling from the capsule, disoriented and terrified. Its cry was high-pitched, heartbreakingly human. In the chaos, one of the mercenaries lunged at Samuel, knocking his rifle aside. They crashed to the floor, struggling in the slick grime. The veteran's training took over. He grabbed the man's wrist and slammed his head against the concrete until he stopped moving. Torres shouted from across the hangar, "They're retreating toward the generators." Samuel scrambled to his feet, grabbing his rifle. The puppy in his coat stirred again, letting out a weak cry that cut through the gunfire. The prototype froze mid-step, its hollow eyes turning toward the sound. It tilted its head as if recognizing the cry, then began to move slowly, uncertainly toward Samuel. "Captain," he said hoarsely, "it's coming this way." "Then shoot it," she yelled. "No," he said, lowering his weapon slightly. "It's not attacking." The creature stopped a few feet away, trembling violently. Rain from the broken ceiling panels dripped onto its skin, making it flinch. Samuel saw now that its eyes weren't hollow at all. They were scared. The puppy whined again from within his jacket. The creature responded with a faint chirr that mirrored it. Torres hesitated, lowering her aim slightly. "What the hell is it doing listening?" Samuel said softly. "It knows her." "That's impossible," she said. "One's organic, the other." "Oh, no," he interrupted. "They're the same, twins." The realization hit him like a tidal wave. Two lives born from the same experiment, one broken by design, the other saved by accident. The creature reached out its clawed hand, trembling as it pointed toward the bundle in Samuel's coat. "She's dying," Samuel said, "and it knows it." He took a slow step forward. Torres hissed, "Heart don't. If it wanted to hurt us, it already would have," he said. The prototype's breathing was erratic, its body twitching as though fighting itself. It knelt, pressing a hand to its chest, then to the floor, leaving faint streaks of glowing residue. The light pulsed in rhythm with the puppy's fading heartbeat. "They're connected," Torres whispered, "like one pulse feeding another." "Exactly," Samuel said. "It doesn't want war. It wants to finish what they started to live." The mercenary leader rose from behind a console, shouting, "Don't touch it, it's unstable!" He raised his weapon, but Samuel was faster. One shot. The man fell. The echo hung in the air, swallowed by the rain leaking through the ceiling. Samuel turned back to the prototype, which now knelt completely still, its gaze locked on him. "It's okay," he whispered. "She's safe now." He unzipped his jacket just enough to reveal the puppy's face. The creature made a soft sound, half sob, half sigh, and then slowly reached forward. Its hand brushed Samuel's sleeve, leaving behind a faint golden shimmer. Then it looked up one last time, eyes reflecting both grief and peace, before collapsing forward. The glow spread across the floor, illuminating the dark hangar like morning light breaking through clouds. The rain had stopped hours before, but the hangar still dripped with the memory of the storm. Water pooled around shattered equipment, reflecting the faint glow of emergency lights that flickered from dying generators. Samuel Hart stood near the center of the wreckage, his body-aching uniform torn, breath visible in the cold morning air. The puppy rested in his arms, its fur damp and streaked with grime, but its breathing was steady. The golden hue that had once pulsed beneath its skin was gone now, replaced by fragile warmth. Captain Torres stood beside him, her face pale but resolute, her side wrapped in a quick field dressing. Around them, rescue units moved through the debris, sealing off the perimeter, photographing the scene that looked more like a battlefield than an airport. Containment complete, one officer called out. No remaining hostiles. Biohazard crew en route. Torres gave a faint nod, but said nothing. Her attention was fixed on the small device in her hand, a portable receiver flickering with erratic signals. The noise crackled high-pitched and rhythmic, like a heartbeat, distorted through static. "You hear that?" she said quietly. Samuel frowned. "It's just interference." "No," Torres said, shaking her head. "It's coming from her." She turned the device toward the small creature in Samuel's arms. The signal grew louder, sharper, synchronizing perfectly with the animal's pulse. Samuel stiffened. "What does that mean?" Torres lowered her voice. "Hyrabio didn't lose control of the project. They're still connected to it. That light we saw, it wasn't power. It was communication. They built her to respond to them. You're saying they can still reach her?" "Worse," she said. "They already are." She tapped the screen, showing a faint tracking coordinate pulsing in the distance. Signals transmitting east across the Atlantic. It's calling something back. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Then we shut it off." "If we can," she said grimly. "But if it's biological, not mechanical cutting, it might kill her." He looked down at the puppy sleeping against his chest, her small body rising and falling in fragile rhythm. "They can't have her," he said quietly. "Not after everything she's been through." Torres looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and fear. "She's not just a pet, Samuel. She's a transmitter, a living beacon. They'll come again. Then they'll have to go through me again," he said firmly. His voice carried the steel of a man who had buried enough and refused to lose one more thing that still breathed. The receiver's pitch changed suddenly, the signal flattening into a long, haunting tone. Torres frowned, adjusting the dial. "It's stabilizing," she said. "No, wait, look at the wavelength." The screen displayed two signals, now one faint, one strong, pulsing in opposite rhythm. Samuel's heart pounded. "Two signals." "Yes," Torres said slowly. "The second one shouldn't exist. It's like the echo of another source." Samuel's mind flashed back to the hangar. The prototype's last moments, the light spreading across the floor, the creature collapsing with its hand outstretched. He looked down at the small dog and whispered, "It's her twin." Torres's eyes widened. "You think it's still active?" "No," he said softly. "I think she's trying to reach it." The puppy stirred slightly, letting out a faint sound, half whine, half sigh. The receiver flickered in response, the twin signals overlapping for an instant before separating again. The pattern wasn't random. It was rhythmic, deliberate. "It's like language," Torres said in disbelief. "Some kind of encoded emotional frequency. It's not data, it's feeling." "Grief," Samuel murmured. "She's calling for what she lost." He sat down heavily against a metal crate, exhaustion finally sinking in. The puppy shifted in his arms, her tiny head resting against his chest, her breathing shallow but peaceful. "You said they made her to transmit," he said quietly. "Maybe they didn't expect her to choose what she sent." Torres crouched beside him, watching the faint light that pulsed beneath the puppy's thin fur, a ghost of the golden glow that had once healed her. "You think she's mourning?" "I know she is," Samuel said. His voice was rough like gravel underfoot. "She was born in captivity, used as a weapon, and the only thing that ever understood her gave up its life so she could have one. You don't need a soul to feel loss. You just need a heartbeat." Torres looked down, her expression unreadable. "We can't keep her here," she said finally. "The agency will want to dissect what's left. If they think she's transmitting, they'll take her apart to stop it." Samuel stared at the horizon, where the dawn broke over the wet runway, streaking the clouds with faint gold. "Then we don't let them." He stood pulling the coat tighter around the small life he carried. "I've got a place outside the city, quiet off the grid. They won't find us there." Torres hesitated. "If you run, they'll call it interference with federal containment." "Let them," he said. "I fought worse men than them for less reason." She almost smiled. You're still a soldier, aren't you? No, he said. I'm a father who didn't get it right the first time. The words hung heavy between them. Torres didn't reply. Instead, she reached into her pocket and handed him a data chip. This has everything we recovered Hirabio's network, their research notes, and the transmission patterns. If they track you, this is what they want. Keep it close. He nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me, she said quietly. Just keep her alive. The rain had started again, soft, almost cleansing. Samuel walked toward the open tarmac, the puppy stirring faintly as if sensing the shift. The receiver still hung from Torres's hand, its two signals pulsing slower now, one fading the other, steadying like a heartbeat, finding peace. She's calming. Torres whispered more to herself than anyone. It's like she knows. Samuel turned back once his eyes meeting hers. She knows, he said, because she's not just living, she's remembering. The hum of distant engines echoed from the main runway as emergency crews cleared debris. The storm had left behind a strange quiet, the kind that comes after survival, when the world feels both heavier and somehow more sacred. Samuel stopped near the hangar door and looked down at the small creature nestled in his arms. Her eyes were half open now, reflecting the faint light of dawn. You're safe, he whispered. You can rest. But the puppy's gaze didn't rest on him. It fixed on the broken hangar behind them, where the prototype had fallen. She whimpered softly, a sound so pure and mournful that it silenced even the rain. The receiver in Torres's hand blinked one last time, showing both signals merging into one, a long, unbroken line. Torres gasped. The transmission just stopped. Samuel felt it too, the faint pulse under his hand slowing, steadying then sinking perfectly with his own heartbeat. The small dog blinked once, then nuzzled against him. The silence that followed wasn't absence, it was connection. Snow had fallen early that year, blanketing the forest in silence so complete that even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Samuel Hart sat beside the window of his small cabin, the wood stove crackling softly behind him, the smell of pine and ash drifting through the single cracked pane. Outside, the world looked untouched, pure in a way he hadn't seen since his childhood, long before war had turned purity into memory. On his lap lay the puppy, smaller now, thinner, but calm, wrapped in an old flannel blanket. Her breathing was slow, steady, her body still faintly warm against the cold morning air. The scars on her neck had faded to pale lines, almost invisible beneath her fur. For weeks they had lived like this quietly, anonymously. Torres had helped him vanish, falsifying reports, declaring both him and the creature lost in the storm. Hirabio had gone silent, but Samuel knew silence could mean many things. Sometimes it was peace. Sometimes it was waiting. He'd learned that in combat, that the quiet, just before dawn, was never trustable. He looked down at the little creature stirring on his lap, her gray eyes half open. You've been through hell, haven't you, girl? He murmured. She blinked slowly, her tail twitching weakly, and he almost smiled. He had started calling her Ember, not because she burned, but because she hadn't gone out when everything else did. Ember had learned the rhythm of his days, the sound of his boots on the wooden floor, the creak of the cabin door, the low hum of the radio that never worked. She'd follow him outside when he gathered firewood, staying close, head-tilting at every bird call or snapping twig. Sometimes at night, when the wind howled through the trees, she'd rest her small head on his chest, and he'd whisper stories from long ago, stories about deserts and dust, about brothers who never came home, about his son, who would have been her age if time had been kinder. And for the first time since that terrible night years ago, he slept without dreams. But that morning felt different. The air was heavier, the silence too deep. He felt it before he saw it, a vibration in the floorboards, faint but growing. He rose slowly, setting Ember down on the couch, and moved toward the door. Through the cracks in the blinds, he saw them faint red lights moving between the trees, drones gliding silently over the snow, their rotors humming like a swarm of hornets. He cursed under his breath. They found us. Torres had warned him this might happen. Hyrabia would never let their experiment disappear completely. Even erased data left ghosts in the system. Samuel grabbed his rifle from the mantel and checked the magazine out of old instinct, though he already knew there wasn't enough ammo for this. He looked back at Ember, who was watching him quietly, her eyes reflecting the flicker of the fire. "They're coming, little one," he said softly. "Guess we can't hide forever." He stepped outside, boots sinking into the snow. The forest was eerily beautiful branches coated in ice, the sunrise casting pink light over the horizon. It felt wrong that something so cruel could find its way into something so peaceful. The hum grew louder. Shadows moved in the fog. Red beams swept across the clearing, scanning for heat signatures. Samuel ducked behind a tree rifle, ready, breath steady. "Not yet," he whispered. "Just a little closer." He fired once, the shot echoing across the valley, striking one drone out of the air. The rest swarmed instantly, their searchlights converging on the cabin. He fired again, taking down another, but they kept coming, dozens now mechanical predators slicing through the cold. A voice echoed through the static of one drone's speaker, Samuel Hart. "You are in possession of unauthorized biological property. Surrender the specimen immediately." Samuel spat into the snow. "She's not property." He reloaded, but the clip jammed. The next second, a blast hit the porch, sending him sprawling backward. Pain tore through his shoulder, the rifle skidding out of reach. The snow hissed as sparks burned into it. He looked up just in time to see the drones hovering over the tree line, forming a circle of red light around the cabin. The voice repeated, "Surrender the specimen." The cabin door creaked behind him. Ember stepped out onto the porch, small paws sinking into the snow. "No," Samuel rasped, struggling to stand. "Stay inside." But she didn't. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dawn, that familiar golden shimmer returning not bright this time, but soft like candlelight. The drone's scanners flickered, their lights pulsed erratically, losing synchronization. "What are you doing?" Samuel whispered, staggering toward her. Ember turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. In that look was no fear, only understanding, the same expression his son had given him long ago, in their final moment, that silent acknowledgement between souls when words are useless. The glow grew stronger, spreading from her eyes down her chest, outlining her small frame with threads of light. "No," Samuel said again, falling to his knees beside her. "Don't do this." The air vibrated as the hum of the drones distorted their lenses, warping in confusion. The light from Ember's body intensified, not violent, but pure. It reached upward like dawn, breaking through storm clouds. The snow glowed gold where it touched her light. Samuel reached out his hand, trembling as it brushed her fur. It was warm, alive, impossibly calm. "Ember, please," he whispered. "You don't have to." The voice from the drones faltered, static, breaking into fragments. "Signal. Interference. Cannot. Locate." And then the realization hit him. She wasn't defending herself, she was erasing herself. The last trace of the signal, Hyra Bio, could follow the biological beacon that had bound her to them since birth. She was shutting it down from within. "No," he said, tears freezing on his cheeks. "You'll die." She stepped closer, pressing her small head against his hand. The light engulfed them both, and for a moment he felt warmth, unlike anything he'd known since his family was whole, an impossible peace. The drones spun wildly, their systems collapsing one by one, dropping into the snow. The forest fell silent again. When the light faded, Ember lay still, her body limp, her fur soft beneath the faint layer of frost. Samuel gathered her into his arms, shaking. No, stay with me," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. But the heartbeat he had come to trust was gone. The glow had taken it with her. He knelt there in the snow as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the horizon gold. The drones lay dead around him, their eyes dark, their noise gone. The world was quiet again. After a long time, he stood carrying her inside. He placed her gently beside the fire, wrapped in the same flannel she had slept in, and sat there beside her until the flames died down to embers. The irony of her name struck him then. Ember, the last warmth before the dark, the proof that even after the fire dies, it still remembers how to glow. He looked out the window at the light creeping across the snow. Somewhere out there, Torres would see the signal go dark and know it was over. But for Samuel, it was not an ending, it was a beginning. He had spent a lifetime fighting wars that took everything, and now in the silence of a cabin in the woods, a small creature had taught him the one thing no battlefield ever could love is not possession. It's the courage to set something free, even when freedom means loss. He leaned back, eyes closed, the first peaceful tear slipping down his face as he whispered, "Rest now, little one. You made the world gentle again." Outside, the first light of dawn spread across the forest, touching the snow with gold, and for a fleeting moment it seemed as if the earth itself remembered her. If this story moved, you take a second to like and subscribe. It helps us share more stories that remind the world what love and sacrifice truly mean. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and what part of the story hit you the hardest. Your thoughts keep these stories alive.